Welcome, everyone, to the 9th episode of Dark Sessions. Thank you for joining us on YouTube and on the podcast. I appreciate your support. Today, we will be talking about a fairly popular topic: hating the sound of your own voice. I think everybody started out there. I actually saw a lot of it on the No Sleep OOC, where people were actually talking about, more recently actually, getting over the sound of your own voice, and it kind of made me chuckle because it was like new narrators, and that seems to be like the most common thing. I was like, I hate my voice. How do you get over it? I hate listening to myself when I edit.
When I started, I hated the sound of my voice. Like, I couldn't get past it. I tried so many different styles when I was new,
What do you mean styles?
and, like, I don't know, okay, so my first narration, like, my first proper narration because, like, my first, like, dozen or so horror videos were still in, like, a commentary voice. So, when I got into, like, the actual background image, I'm not relying on Call of Duty Zombies gameplay in the background. There's music, I'm trying to make an entertaining, narration.
Hmm.
I was, like, super, super monotone because I was scared to, like, peak too high or to try and make my voice sound deep, so I would just kinda narrate like this, and that was pretty much it.
Hmm.
And, listening back to that, I hated it. So then,
Yeah.
I only did one narration like that, thankfully, but, the sad thing about that is people look back for your first one, and that was my first one.
It's kind
So
of funny how that works out. You end up, trying not to do too much in the beginning. And you're like, okay, maybe like I will do it this way and not hate myself. And for a while you think, okay, I'm good. But then hundreds of videos later, you go back and you're like, oh my gosh, I should just cancel my channel right now.
yeah. Well, then it's like I started getting into my head, like, I don't have a deep voice, and that was kind of the in thing, especially back then. I think it's kind of changed a bit now because there's a lot more voices to pick from nowadays. But
Yeah.
back then it was like, you had to have a deep voice, and if you didn't have a deep voice, a lot of people were faking them,
Yeah. Like,
and, like, I didn't wanna do that, so I just felt like the biggest misfit, and I think it's, like, natural human instinct to kinda hate your voice anyway, but then when you're trying to, do something in a certain genre and you feel like the odd man out, it's like you hate it even more.
yeah, I don't know what it is about hating your own voice. I don't know if it comes down to self esteem or something, but I used to be the same way when I started. For the longest time, editing my own audio, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You might as well put like nails on a chalkboard, and I'd rather listen to that for 14 hours straight. But surprisingly enough, the longer that you listen to your voice, I found for me it gets so much better and you get to appreciate it. So
Yeah, yeah,
like,
I went through a stage, like, mid last year, I wanna say is when I finally started to kind of almost enjoy my own voice, but I think it might be like some Stockholm syndrome
oh
because
my gosh.
you're sitting there editing your own voice for hours on end, so you just become numb to it, and then eventually you're like, "You know what? I like it."
Well, yeah,
I don't know.
and you get to appreciate it. I when you hit those certain points, right? When maybe it's an action scene or maybe it's a more of a calmer scene or you're trying to be more dramatic. When you just initially don't hate yourself and hate your voice, you'll be like, "Oh," because this happened to me. I'll be like, "Oh, well, that was actually good." Downward inflection, the emotion that's being delivered through the narration. You start to like almost appreciate what you can do. But that
Well,
doesn't
yeah, you
come
kind
overnight, man. That took a
yeah,
long time, like many videos. Many
you get to
videos.
learn your voice over time too because, it took me a while to find, like, the cadence that works for me, which
Yeah.
I would say for me is, like, the closest to my natural voice that I can get.
I think that's
And
honestly should be a staple. If you're trying to do something outside of your natural voice, I think you're going to end up hurting yourself in the long run.
yep,
But
yep.
we've touched on that
But then
before.
but then it was like when you get to the intense parts, like I don't want to just drone through them.
No.
So it kind of took a while. Like I used to kind of do like a voice crack thing, like I'm scared and like I can barely talk. I'm so scared. It's kind of like the approach that I initially went with.
Yep.
And like it
Yep.
was okay, but it wasn't really me, you know?
Mhm.
And then there's people in the comment section like, this guy has a voice crack problem, and it's like, no, I'm doing it on purpose because I'm scared. Like,
Like
I
I'm
don't,
legit scared right now reading this
like I'm
story.
terrified.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
Who's knocking?
I don't know. It's like you listen back to it and you kind of get into your own head. Maybe that's not the right approach. So I kind of now do it where like I get quieter instead of louder and talk just like a little bit faster and like with a little bit more rasp. And I've kind of found that that's like the sweet zone for my voice, even though that might not work for somebody else.
I think that's pretty standard though, cuz when you get into more like action scenes and stuff like that, you want to pick up the tempo and drive the pace. You know, pick up the tempo, drive the pace. You don't even necessarily have to deepen your voice. You can maybe heighten your voice a little bit, maybe add a little bit more breath, or go with more sharper words that are like they I don't know how to explain it. Very
Like
sharp.
a like a
They
cut through narration.
yeah, they end dramatically. Not well, they don't even end dramatically, but they just cut at the end. There's no breath. There's no elongating the last syllable or the last letter, you know? It's very cut, very fast, very direct. I think
Yeah, I see what you're
that's
saying.
just from what I've like listened to in voiceover artists like Scott Brick, for example. Been listening to a lot of his stuff. He's pretty cool. But
I
yeah,
know we've kind of touched on this before, but I think one of the coolest things that I find about narration is that there is no wrong way to do it.
well,
I mean, I
there's
guess
bad
there's
ways to
like
do it.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely there's bad ways to do it, but there's no wrong way to do it.
Not yeah, so not when it comes to maybe portraying a certain emotion. Like, for example, the protagonist is upset. You can either add in a little bit of a voice crack or some sniffles if you really want to get into it, but that's hit or miss with people. Yeah, exactly. Or you can just change how your voice sounds, you know? You can just kind of get a little bit more drawn out and slow, you know, and kind of portray a little bit of sadness that way. Same with, you know, being in intense scenes and stuff like that. You can approach it in a couple different ways from what I've experienced and from what I've noticed. Just depends on the story, but yeah, you don't have to do anything too crazy. And there's nothing that would necessarily be wrong in that sense. The where I was saying that it would be wrong is if you're just monotone throughout the whole thing. Then that, you know, might
Yeah, but
need some
even
improvements.
then, like I mean, if we're talking about just scary story narration here on YouTube, and even most other extensions, right? Like, there's usually a backing track for most. Well, I'm not gonna say most voiceovers because that would be false, but
Mhm.
I just in this niche, there's a backing track, like a background ambience or music or something. So
You
even
know
if you're a
what?
little bit monotone and you get to a scary part, you throw on some like deep voice by Mew. It's like now it's scary.
Deep
Like,
voiced by Mew?
yeah, you've never heard that track before?
No.
It's like the da-na-na-na-da-da-da.
Oh,
I don't. Yeah, I think I did that wrong, but
what do you think of backing tracks? Do you think they're necessary? I'm asking for
I don't.
myself.
I don't think I don't think they're necessary at all. I've also noticed that there's a lot of different preferences. Like I've had some people tell me to just cut the music out completely, and I do have some videos where there's nothing in the background, like no rain, no music, no nothing. It's just my voice. And nobody really complains about it, but I try and direct my videos in a way that I would want to listen to them.
Hmm.
and I can tell you that like my preference would be to have some backing music. I've never been a fan of like the ambient noise, like like not rain or crackling fire or anything like that. I think those are cool, but like the backing like I like the piano
Okay.
soundtracks.
So what
You know what I mean?
don't you like?
Where it's like that droning sound, you know, kind of like some white noise in the background or something like that.
Where it's just constant?
No, not necessarily. I don't know how to explain it. It's like the ambient horror music.
Okay.
Like I I do like it in some scenarios. There's a few tracks that I use pretty religiously, but I've never been a fan of like the whole video being just that. But that's just a personal preference. I know there's a lot of people out there that hate piano soundtracks and would prefer that a million times over a piano soundtrack, but it all comes down to preference.
I've experimented with no backing music. And no one's really made a balk about it, surprisingly. And I've just never found one that's really been like, yeah, that's the one. You know, like a nice piano or something like that. So if you have any tracks that you really like that are nice piano tracks, hit me up because I need
Oh, I've
to.
got a ton. I've got about 20 or 30 of them that I use for like every video.
Oh, hot dang. Do you use just one track in a video?
No, never, never.
No?
I try and never duplicate a song. So like if a song is 3 minutes, it plays for those 3 minutes and then it goes into like another 3 minute song.
Really?
Yep.
I've actually only
Yep.
ever
Yep.
looped the same backing track.
I mean, there's times where like say a story is 5 minutes and I found a song that works really well for it,
Mm-hmm.
and the song is like 3 minutes. I might put a splice 2 minutes in and then
True.
extend the song.
Okay.
But you got to be kind of careful with that because you got to make it very subtle.
You know what I actually did once, and it was a low point in my life. Um, I was experimenting, and I only ever did it for one video, and it quickly stopped after that. Sporadic backing tracks where they'd play, fade out, there'd be silence, and then another one would come in randomly, play, fade out. Someone said it sounded like some Korean TV show or something like that. I'm like, I'm like, all right, I'll never do that again. Thanks for the feedback. But um, when it comes to your own voice, is there, I guess, if people are necessarily wondering, is there anything you can do to get used to it or get used to it quicker? I don't know if we maybe
I feel
necessarily
like
answered it right away, but
I feel like the more you do something, the more used to it you get. Cause I don't know, like I never really got used to my own voice until I started uploading a lot. Like until I just kind of went crazy with uploading.
is then you're
And then
forced to
that's
sit there and listen to it. You're
yeah,
forced to
so
like it.
it wasn't like I was editing 20 minutes of audio every 3 or 4 days anymore. Like it was basically all I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had to get used to it pretty quick.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that comes down to it in my eyes. If someone were to ask me that, that's exactly what I'd say. Just it doesn't matter what you sound like. First off, I think you should be cool with yourself. And it doesn't matter what you sound like, accept yourself, accept your voice. That'll make that process easier. Um, but outside of that, getting used to it will just come through repetition. You got to get the reps in, and then you'll start to appreciate your voice, appreciate how you sound, instead of cringing every time you hear it. Because, like everyone else who started in this, you'll start out more often than not liking the sound of your own voice, but that's not how it is all the time. That eventually goes away the more that you listen to it. So there is hope. If you do not enjoy the sound of your voice, there is hope. You just gotta force yourself through those uncomfortable sessions and actually purposefully listen to yourself. And that goes for everything. Like, I fancy myself a singer, and I didn't like myself. I didn't like how I sound when I first started singing. obviously because it was terrible, but for a long time after that. And over time, over multiple sessions of singing music on my own or in front of people, you eventually get to appreciate yourself and appreciate your voice. But that doesn't come overnight, and it doesn't come from just doing it once or twice. You got to
Well,
you
yeah,
got to get the reps
it's
in.
it's all about finding your style too. I mean, going into music, do you know who Oliver Sykes is?
Oliver Sykes, no.
Lead singer of Bring Me the Horizon. I love their music. I think they are extremely talented. A lot of people like to make the argument that Ollie Sykes is a terrible singer
Mhm.
because when you listen to him try and do like somebody else's song like a cover,
Yep.
it's just it doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? But then you listen to even the live performances of his songs and it's great. It's amazing. So, like it's about finding your sound and what works for you. And he has a band that definitely complements his voice.
Oh, for sure. Like you can't very well ask an opera singer to go and start singing hip hop or or something like that. They might be able to do
Exactly.
it, but
Yeah, no,
that's
that's
not where their
that's
strength
exactly the
is.
point I'm making.
Yeah. So you might not necessarily have a voice for narrating, but maybe you have a voice for I don't know, cartoons, for example, or
Well, I
something
would
like
say
that.
anybody has a voice for narrating as long as they get comfortable with their voice. Confidence goes a long way.
Confidence does go a
Goes a
long way.
very long way. Like if it's very transparent in your narration that you're comfortable doing what you're doing, even if your voice sounds a little bit off or a little bit like less favorable, people are going to hear that confidence, and I think that'll carry you a lot farther
Well, people are
than
attracted to a confident person in any realm of life. You see someone who dresses up nice and carries themselves like they're, maybe not necessarily all the time, but you know that they're comfortable with themselves. You know, they're walking confident, they're wearing clothes that portray their confidence. When someone's speaking confidently, usually people will listen to them 99% of the time. And people just want someone who is confident in themselves. And that's for some reason contagious. But when it comes to storytelling and narrating, yeah, you be confident with who you are and what you've got. And people will pick up on that. It's a subtle thing. But if you know, maybe think your voice is a little too high or your voice is going through some changes, or it's maybe you think it's a little too low, though in the horror narration community, your voice can never be too low.
oh yeah,
Uh
the deeper the better, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But regardless, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. But what you should do is portray some sort of confidence in what you're doing. And that again doesn't come overnight. I'm sure when you first started, and I know when I first started, I was not confident, but that confidence will come in time as you get better at narrating, whether it be through just repeatedly doing it, looking up videos on how other narrators and professional voiceover artists do it, and then putting all this into your toolbox. And the more stuff that you get in your toolbox, the more confident you'll become. And then that will just start to come out naturally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like something I find interesting is my narrations from 2015, 2016, and even 2017 were a lot better than my stuff in 2018. And I think that's because I was confident with the voice that I found like, a few months in back in 2015. But when I came back in 2018, it's like I wanted to sound better and I
Hmm.
tried so hard to sound better that I sounded infinitely worse.
You're trying too hard.
Yeah, yeah. So now it's like now that all my old videos are gone, if you go back to my what are now my earlier videos, it sounds drastically different compared to now. And you would think like I was new to this listening to those videos
Hmm.
when I wasn't. I very much wasn't. And It's because I got into my own head and wanted to sound as good as possible.
Without just being yourself, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it all really comes down to is being yourself, being confident. And the fact that you hate your own voice now doesn't mean that it will stick around forever. And there's not a whole lot that is to be said about that because it's not a complex issue. If you hate how you sound, I mean, you either just got to get used to it or you got to get used to it. But if you're going to be in the
Yeah.
narration
I
community,
mean,
like you're going to be listening to yourself a lot. And trust me, it doesn't matter how you sound, you will start to appreciate it more. It
let me
just
know
takes
if it's the
time.
same for you, but nowadays when I go to edit a video, it's like I'm not even listening to myself anymore. Like I'm just so used to editing that voice
Hmm.
that like I don't even really associate it with myself anymore.
Um, yeah, I guess I've kind of detached that from myself. But granted, my self esteem has been rising in the last couple of years. And when I first started, I think that was when I started actually improving that. So when I first started, I hated the sound of my own voice because I was just more or less insecure in who I was. Um, but now I have sort of dissociated my voice from myself when I listen to it. So now when I listen to it, it's like just this separate thing. I know it's me, but it's become its own thing, something that I've gotten used to, I guess. It's kind of weird because I'll listen to that and actually be able to objectively listen instead of thinking that every word I said was sucked. There was too much inflection here, too much um, opposite of inflection, deflection, something like that. But now I
Yeah,
can actually
definitely.
like edit with an objective mindset instead of just hating every syllable because I wasn't, totally cool with myself.
I can say there's a few times even to this day where I'll be listening back to a recording and I really hate the way that like I ended a sentence or something. And if I feel like that sentence isn't completely vital to what's going on in the story at that moment, I'll just take it out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
I leave that kind of stuff in because you're probably going to be the only one who's going to notice that. And sometimes
Yeah.
I have to
Well, I don't
remind
know,
myself.
like just a few weeks ago I ended a sentence with like a super valley girl accent. I don't know why. I don't
Super
know
Valley
how.
Girl? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Like I ended the sentence like this. And I was like, where did that even come from? Like I was listening to it back and I had to listen back to it like 10 times. I was like, what? Like where? Like I don't even know how that happened. And I kind of like weighed my options. I was like, it's kind of a minor detail of the story. I'm just gonna take it out.
Why did you not? I guess you didn't pick up on that while you're recording, eh?
No, because
And you
when I
didn't want to spot
record,
edit?
yeah, I don't like spot editing because I feel like you can never get the right sound again.
You know what, though?
At least not for me.
I, y- the tricks that you, I'm hesitant to say tricks because I think they're pretty common knowledge once you figure out that they're common knowledge, but normalizing and then adding the compressor on and normalizing and compressing to the exact same things. Um, has helped me spot edit like crazy because the last time when I wasn't normalizing and I was just compressing, I I think it was like almost all the time I couldn't get the sound right again, but that actually helped. Uh, I think it's just important, like to spot edit to listen back to your previous sentence if you need to, and then you'll get that again. But I mean, spot
Yeah.
editing I think is a personal thing. If you want to cut whole sentences out, by means, just
See, the way that I record is I just kind of like I relax a little bit, kind
hmm
of take a few deep breaths, and then when I record, I mean I'm just cruising. And obviously if I make any mistakes, I just kind of fix it on the spot.
yeah, like
So
that's what I'll do
so
too.
I find that if I get too comfortable,
hmm
if I start just getting like way too confident, then I start making more mistakes than if I'm like kind of still paying attention.
You just barrel through each sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like. I
Well,
don't.
well, no, no.
No.
I don't know. Like I try and pay attention. Like I'm still absorbing the story,
Hmm.
but I find myself more often than not recording and forgetting that I'm recording while I'm recording, and I kind of just start daydreaming while I'm recording.
Mm. And you start
And
messing
that
up
that
a
can be
bunch
a
of sentences, and
yeah, and that can be a problem.
yeah.
I so like I kind of have to ground myself a little bit. So now I kind of do like 4 or 5 paragraphs and then I'll pause and then I'll go again just to not get way too into the groove and start messing up all over the place.
I think it's I think it's just good for your voice to do that. I'll have like an open water bottle beside me, and every time I scroll on my monitor, I'll take a drink. Not a big drink, but just enough to moisten my mouth a little bit, get rid of all the sticky sounds. And then I don't know about you, but have you ever taken a drink and then tried to record and your voice sounds absolutely terrible? Like
Yeah,
you have to wait
I
until it
actually
goes
try
down.
to I try to not drink water while I record.
Oh, give it a try, man. It's good for you.
If I do, I do room temperature water.
Yes, absolutely. You just take like a little bit, like just a sip, and then let it go down. And then a few seconds later, then you can start speaking. But if you take a drink and then you try to uh, keep reading, it sounds so bad, so
You know,
tinny, so high pitched.
I have a question for you, and I guess it kind of falls into this conversation. So when I first started, I made a lot of mistakes while recording. Like when I first started, it was like every single sentence I'd have to take twice. And I've noticed over the years, I hardly make mistakes anymore. Like barely.
Well,
Have you noticed like the same for you, or do you still like make an equal amount of mistakes as when you started? The reason why I ask is because I see a lot of people start and then they get demotivated because they feel like th're a bad narrator because they make a lot of mistakes, and then they think
man,
about like different people that live stream themselves recording, like me or Jensen or Let's Read or the various amount of people that live stream their recordings and they get demotivated because of it. But I don't think they realize it's because we've been doing this for so long. Like we just
yo,
kind of know where to keep our eyes while we're reading. We kind of know how far ahead to stay. Uh, we know some techniques, and that's why we make less mistakes. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else. I know that's the case for me.
well,
But
for
have you
anyone who's
noticed?
listening who might be feeling like that, I'll tell you right now, it's going to be a good day if I get through a 5 sentence paragraph without having to redo one. So
Really?
I make a lot of mistakes, and I don't. The mistakes I make now are a lot different than the mistakes I made at the beginning. The mistakes I made at the beginning was rushing through sentences, barreling through paragraphs, not using breath and cadence as a tool. I think it's very important to take breaths and to use silence to enunciate and to give room to your narration and stuff like that. But I don't know when it comes to me recording if it's I don't know if it's because I'm not focused or maybe my brain is just off doing another thing, which it does tend to happen sometimes. It'll be very aloof and it becomes hard to focus. But yeah, there will be some times where I'll just start talking to myself during the recordings. I'll be like I'll be saying, Sally went to the store to grab some milk, right? And I'll mess that up. And on the third time, I'll be like, Sally went to the store because she wished she could freaking read. And then I'll do it again. So I definitely chirp myself um, when I read because there'll be some times, man, where I just can't get a word. And
Oh
it's a simple
yeah,
word,
yeah.
but I'll trip over it. But
I would say nowadays, like when I do make mistakes, it's because it's like a tongue twister or something, or like a word I'm just not good at saying, like peripheral. Like if I come across that word, you can
peripheral.
guarantee
Mm.
I'm not getting that first try. Not gonna happen.
Yep.
Or like any words even similar to that, like preferable. I can't do it. Like just different words that just don't flow well in a sentence. I'll find myself still messing up on them.
I
But I mean, that's obviously not a bad thing
n-
because
it's
it's good
it's
to want to make it sound as good as possible.
it's not it's not a bad thing to make mistakes, obviously. Um, I think one of the biggest things for me that I've started to notice, it depends on who the author is. For example, Hyper Obscura, have you heard of him or her?
I have. Yep.
So their writing is, I think, much like how I think. So if the writer writes how I think, I can effectively predict where a sentence is going to go because that's just naturally how my mind would word that sentence. So it makes it easier. But if I'm reading someone's work who's maybe got a lot of intricate words in there, or maybe it's more formal and not the way that I would necessarily speak, then I'll have a lot of trouble doing that. Um, just because now you actually have to pay attention and it's not a natural thing. But I get jealous of those of you who don't make a lot of mistakes when you're recording. But on the flip side, when I'm reading live, I actually read a lot better. It could
Same.
be
Same.
like if someone's listening to me, I read so much better than I would otherwise. Or if I'm reading live, I'll hardly make mistakes. And I think
Yeah.
that might be
Like
just like a focus thing, right? Because you're like, I don't want to mess up and make myself look a fool. So I've got to really pay attention. And maybe that's just like when I'm reading them by myself, I'm not necessarily paying 100% attention. That's the only thing I can really think of off the top of my head.
yeah, back to what you were saying though, like anytime I record something that I've written, it's like it's flawless. Like I typically don't make any mistakes. I might make one or two. If it's a story that I wrote, I can just go. Like it's not an issue. And that's because like it's written in the way that I think. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's interesting.
I
But
don't
it's
think
definitely something I picked up on too.
I don't think anyone should be discouraged that people read well live. I mean, if you gave it a shot, I'm sure you'd find yourself reading pretty good live too, especially when people are watching you. But even
Yeah,
if
and
you make a,
if you get comfortable doing it too, I mean that helps big time.
and I wouldn't even worry about making mistakes by yourself. Like for me, I'll have maybe like a 40-minute recording, and I can trim anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes off that, and literally like sentence errors. So 3 to 6 minutes of just sentences that get mixed up or messed up. That's a lot. Sometimes though, like I said, depends on the author. Sometimes it can go a lot more smooth, but in the end, and even still this day, I don't fancy myself um a popular narrator by any stretch of the imagination. Like for all in my eyes, I'm still new here, but um with 250 videos out now, I think I still make a lot of mistakes, and you can't hold that against you when you're reading
Yeah, I mean
because there's it's just
you're always going to make some mistakes. Like my video that's going up tonight, the audio for that I recorded for 1 hour and 6 minutes, and the finished video is 1 hour and three and a half.
and
So
that's a good outcome.
yeah, no, I mean that's like I couldn't ask for a better outcome, but that's
Yeah.
still 2.5 minutes of fuck.
Oh, for
Got that
sure.
wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do it again, you know?
It's just
So,
one
I
of
mean,
those
like, no matter
things.
what, you're still going to make mistakes, and I would definitely say that was one of my most solid recordings I've had in a while.
I mean, now
Um,
that we're kind of talking about it, and this is the whole thing with being a narrator and being a creator is you always want to try and get better. So what I'm actually going to do is maybe look up techniques on reading like that and just see if there's
you know
anything I can
something
learn.
this is a technique I picked up on my own, and I don't know if it's something that the brain naturally does anyway, but I noticed that once I took note of it, I started reading a lot more fluently. I I stay about 5 words ahead of where my mouth is.
Okay. Like constantly?
Yep, like the whole time I'm reading. So, uh, say I'm reading a sentence. By the time that my mouth is narrating the middle of that sentence, my eyes are already at the end of it.
Okay.
I don't know, I've noticed that that helps me a lot
Hmm.
because otherwise I find myself narrating like this, and if you're kind of staying a little bit ahead, it's just fluent, like you're just cruising along,
Maybe I'll try
and,
that because I don't I
say
don't
like
do that.
there's say like there's a really, like, important word at the end of the sentence, I have time to kind of bring my voice into, like, a scoop up for it because I already know it's coming,
Yes, absolutely.
so
I don't do it that way actually. The way I read, and it's what I picked up from listening to a lot of, not a lot of, but listening to some pretty high profile narrators, is using a lot of breaths, essentially. Depends on if the
yeah, don't be
situation
afraid
calls
to
for it.
breathe.
Oh, 100%. Um, there will be a time where I'll break up a sentence into like maybe 2 or 3 breaths where I take a nice natural breath. You know, I'm not making it sharp, I'm not cutting it, but I'm just giving that sentence or the fragment of a sentence room to breathe. And while I'm doing that, I'm skipping like 5 or 6 words ahead, and then I'm going back to where I started and then reading along. And it's the same thing, staying a few words ahead, breathing, scan ahead, and then come back. And that's kind of what I've been working with right now. And it
Yeah,
seems
and
to work.
I think something I used to do, I would try and make the whole entire sentence just smooth as can be, like no breaths in between a sentence. But I've realized like if you come across a comma or a but or an and or anything like that, take the opportunity to kind of sit back for a second. Like say I was walking around the corner and then I already messed it up. I was walking around the corner and then I saw him. Okay. Instead of doing that, you can be like, I was walking around the corner and then I saw him. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, exactly.
It's like
I would do it that way too, for sure.
it kind of breaks it up a little bit to where I think it adds a little bit to the narration because there's that kind of pause and then, you know what I mean? Instead of just I was walking around the corner and then I saw him. Like I what I mean by that is if you're doing the whole entire narration like that, you're so fixated on you can't pause in the middle of a sentence. You can't do that. And it causes a lot more mistakes. But of course you don't want to get overboard with it either because there's definitely some recordings I've done where I'm not very proud of them because I find myself pausing too much. So
Yep.
I it's kind of like something I've been working on lately is just trying to find that happy medium where I'm only pausing when there's, of course, the end of a sentence. You want to leave some space after that, but for commas, ands, and buts, or I mean, there's other scenarios you kind of can feel them out where that also still works. But I think you get what I'm saying.
And you don't even have to obey commas or punctuation for that matter. Sometimes
Yeah,
as a
yeah. I mean,
narrator,
if it
you
sounds
have
better
to,
to not obey it, then
yep.
go ahead and not obey it.
And that's not against the rules. If you need to blow through a comma because that's what the feel of the story calls for, then you blow through that comma. But I definitely use breaths a lot like that. Like for example, it could be um, my dog died and it destroyed me. There might not be a comma there because it wouldn't make sense. But obviously the narrator or the storyteller in that story is sad, so you'd be like, my dog died today and it destroyed me. You know, you don't have to run through that. You do have liberties in adding those spaces in order to portray a certain feeling. So you don't have to be afraid to kind of step outside the boundaries there and do what you think is right. And using breaths, that's peak, man. If you can nail your breathing down, I think that's it's such a handy tool. It's such a good tool to have in your toolkit. Because if you've got your breathing down, then you might very well have your cadence down. Or like, yeah, sorry, if you have your breathing down, you probably have your cadence down. unless you're breathing really fast and then everything's super quick and then maybe not, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
You got to find that
I
sweet
feel
spot.
like the funny thing is I never really get hate comments about my voice, but I do sometimes. Every once in a while, I have people tell me that I read a little bit too slow, which I find very interesting because I think it's just my voice. Um, like for example, right? This happens all the time, and every single time it happens, I'm like, how? Like, how does that even happen? Like for example, I recorded this story just a few days ago. The recording came out to I think it was like 24 minutes,
Yep.
and I saw that somebody else had already narrated it and uploaded it, and the video was 32 minutes. I
Hmm.
was like, "That's weird. That's like 8 whole extra minutes." So I got curious and I was like, maybe they talked at the end, maybe they had a talk at the beginning, but it was neither. It was just my narration was naturally 8 minutes shorter. And it's tough because like I kind of get into my head like, do I read too fast? But then I've never had anybody tell me that I read too fast. I have had some people tell me I read too slow. So it's like, how am I reading too slow if my narration is 8 minutes shorter than this extremely reputable, very popular narrator's narration of the same story? I don't understand.
Man, the
Like,
way I see it, dude, if you've got 60,000 people who have liked or watched the video and two of them are like, you're reading too slow, you've probably got 59,998 people that think you're reading pretty well, or at least don't
yeah, I mean,
care
that's
enough
true.
to comment. Like I've had a couple people comment in the span of the last couple weeks. They want me to um, basically put the lyrics of the story, put the words of the story in the videos,
Subtitles.
subtitles.
Yeah.
And that seems like something manual that I would have to do if I want it to be correct. And
No, no,
no,
it's one button. One button.
how do you do that? Does it like
When
does
you go to
YouTube do it
upload a
automatically?
video, and if it asks, there'll be like a subtitle box, and it
Hmm.
says like what language is this video in, just put English, and it'll have auto subtitles.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look at that because I was like, if you're wanting me to do that by hand, I can assure you I won't be. But if it's just a
Yeah.
matter of letting it auto subtitle, then
Well,
uh,
the other thing is, even if you don't, YouTube will still detect it, and people can manually turn on subtitles. So
well, then what's the problem? They could do that.
I don't know. I don't know. I've always wondered the same thing too. I think it's because of like the inconvenience of having to do it, but I could be wrong. I mean, there might be more to it. I think maybe if you auto ticket, it's more accurate. Like it gets more words correct. But
It
I
just seemed like a lot of hassle. Did you?
but yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's interesting stuff, man, because I don't know, like I said, I like ever since I started, I've noticed that anytime I do the same story as somebody else, my narration is always shorter. Always. And I don't know. I like it's just two different styles, I guess.
And I am sure in all of this, there's something there that has to do with hating your own voice. Welcome
Oh,
to the
I mean,
Dark
yeah, it's
Sessions
kind of
podcast, where we
it's kind of what I
frequently
mean.
tangent.
It's like it falls into it because it's like getting into your own head, right? Like
Yep.
I think about that. I'm like, how is my narration shorter? Like, am I doing something wrong? I guess it's not the sound of your voice, but like wondering if there's something wrong with my narration. But I also try and like, not let what other people are doing, deter me from doing what I'm doing. So if my
Oh,
narration is
exactly.
shorter and I'm still happy with the product, then
That's
oh
all that
well. I
matters.
mean, what does it matter?
It literally doesn't matter, and you would cost yourself precious moments thinking about that you could use on something else.
Exactly.
So don't compare yourself.
But
Rule number one.
I'm gonna compare myself all the time now.
Yeah. Do you compare yourself to me? I know you do.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Yeah,
be like,
you
I have to read exactly like stories after midnight, otherwise nobody's going to like me.
I've got to develop this Canadian accent that people frequently bring up.
I'm Canadian, eh? My dog
That
apparently didn't
Canadian
like
must
that
be a
very much.
trigger word for your dog or something.
She's like, Canadian?
Yeah. I smell poutine.
That's not my owner. That was a Canadian. Who was in here?
That was actually really good. Everything went
That
fine, and then we say Canadian, and all of a sudden, bork. That's good.
I promise. I promise my dog's not racist.
Oh, well, you know what? As long as she likes ketchup chips, we're good.
I have a feeling she'd probably eat them because she'll eat pretty much anything.
Good doggy. Well, man, do you have anything to say? Because I'm pretty much tapped out. I think we covered that pretty well.
I actually I got one last thing.
Run
I
with it,
feel
dude.
like even just a year ago, I was pretty confident in my narration. Like I said, that's when I started to get really comfortable with it. But now, when I go back a year in the past, I can't stomach it.
Well, yeah, there'd be, comparing yourself as an amateur artist to the stick figures you used to draw. You got to appreciate the
Yeah.
journey from where you started to where you are.
Something
But
I find interesting though is it seems like listeners never really pick up on the differences between like the old and new stuff.
no,
I but but I do. Like I listened to like one of my older videos and it's like, man, I wasn't even using a de-esser on this video. So like my S's are just super overbearing.
just cutting your
And
eardrum in half.
yeah, like my pauses aren't as fluent. They're kind of more sporadic and random. Um, the way that I jump into a sentence is a little bit more jarring than how I jump into them now. It's like I pick up on all of that stuff, but it seems like nobody else really does.
And that just reaffirms my point that, when it comes down to how you end your sentences or stuff like that, you're the only one who will likely notice. And that's case in point right there. Um, I've I'm so surprised that people haven't said, "Wow, this video is trash," on like my 2-year-old videos when I first started, because like I listen to them now and I'm like, what was I thinking? I would literally like
Yeah.
barrel through sentences and paragraphs. My breaths were in weird spots and it was a mess. And no one has said anything. And they've got like three,
Yeah,
four,
it's like
500 views.
I'll get a comment on a video from 2 years ago and somebody's like, "This is the first video I've heard from this channel and I can't believe they don't have more subs." And it's like, "Well, if you think this is good, you
Boy,
should
have I got a video
really
for you.
listen to some new stuff. Like,
Yeah.
how about anything in the last 6 months?
Yeah.
Because what you found my channel on is some hot garbage." Like,
Hey,
so if you enjoyed that, you'll really like the new stuff.
one
But then
person's
I've
hot
also
garbage is
noticed
another person's treasure.
something that's really strange, and I think this plays into nostalgia, is I've had people, say that my old narrations are better than my new stuff, and their
Interesting.
justification for that is because it sounds more raw. But the thing is like, I've always gone for a raw style, always. Like, that's never changed. I think it's just the nostalgia. Like, they enjoy the fact that I didn't know what a de-esser was. They enjoy the fact that I didn't really I wasn't really good with pacing. They enjoy the fact that I kinda jumped into sentences. And now that none of those things are a factor anymore, it sounds different. Therefore, they interpret that as bad.
Maybe
When
I
it's
should do
not
that.
it's not. Like what they're listening to might not be bad, but it's definitely not up to par with what's going on now. And I find that very interesting. I don't know how anybody could listen to something that has less progress and think it's better than something that's a lot more polished, but still with the same rhythm and still the same person. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
I think it's
weird.
just nostalgia though.
It's weird. I guess you can get over processed and too much to the point. I guess the only
Yeah,
thing I could
I
really
think it's
say
just
to back that up would be I honestly will try to almost stutter and sometimes. It might not be in the writing, but I'll almost try to stutter if it calls for it. If someone's scared or is unsure of what's going on or is a bit emotional or something like that, I'll repeat words even though they're not actually repeated in there. And that doesn't
I've done that a few
necessarily
times.
it's not necessarily for anything else other than just kind of portraying some emotion, some raw feelings. You know, when someone's scared, they're not necessarily going to be very scripted, but they're going to be tripping on their words. You know, they're going to be acting scared, and that's the whole thing of being like a narrator or a voiceover artist is portraying those emotions. And sometimes if you're not going to break out into tears over the microphone, which actually people don't necessarily always like,
You
you
know,
can
I
do.
did one really quick, I need to rant. I did one story back in 2018 where it was like a super emotional story, and I basically narrated the whole entire thing to sound as if I was crying. And that video now has almost 300,000 views. So a lot of people have found me off of that video. And whenever I stream or whatever, people are like, "Yeah, you kinda have like a crying narration style," and it's like, "No, I don't. That is one video.
You
It was
screwed
one
yourself, man.
video." Yeah, so it's like the one time where I decided to really toss things up and do a super dramatic reading. That's the one that just so happens to catch the YouTube algorithm, and it's like, why? Like, it could have been any other video,
Well,
but it was that one.
I was cruising Audible, and I saw this one review that made mention of a couple times where the narrator got a choke in his voice as if he was trying to cry, and it was a negative review on that. They didn't like it. I was like, I could see that. Depends on what you're doing it for, I guess. But when it comes to voice acting, yeah, you do want to act. But sometimes, in my opinion at least, you have to find other ways to portray that emotion. So you might not break out full on into tears, but you can trip over your words. You can sound a little bit more downcast, more breathy. There's different things you can do in order to portray that emotion. And sometimes I think that would be better than actually breaking out into tears, or at least sounding like it. But I'm one who has actually decided to sound like I was crying momentarily, but not for like a whole video. I haven't ever done that.
Yeah, I feel like the word voice actor is kind of tossed around a bit too much because voice acting, narrating, they both fall underneath the umbrella of voice over. So I don't know, a lot of people say that narrating isn't voice acting, and even if you aren't um, you know, doing what is commonly known as voice acting, you're still technically voice acting. If you're narrating something that's voiceover work, which is the same thing as voice acting.
Well,
Um,
l- it depends. Because if you're doing a commercial for Burger King, you're going to be doing a different type of voiceover than you would be for a cartoon. For a cartoon, you're going to be voice acting. You're going to be trying to get all those emotions in, being a little bit more dramatic, trying to really act it out. If you're doing like a broadcast thing on the radio or a commercial, you're not necessarily going to be voice acting. So, and I think of David Attenborough when he does his documentaries there, like Planet Earth, I believe it is, from Blue Planet, like all those ones. Um,
mhm.
I don't know if I would consider that voice acting, but that would definitely be a voiceover or a narration, commentary type thing. So there's different styles for what you're trying to do. Where like if you tried to take David Attenborough and he narrated Mickey Mouse, obviously I would still listen to it and think it's the greatest thing, but it's not going to have the same effect as if you got a skilled voice actor to act those characters out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a tiptoe conversation, but I don't know. I kind of think like, if you're doing something on a microphone, it's pretty much voice acting, but um I guess voice I don't know, like it's a conversation I've seen so many people have, and I don't really feel very strongly one way or the other. I just bring it up because I like to hear other people's takes on this. But voice acting is still voice over work.
I
which falls underneath
I
the
guess
same
if you
topic
wanted
as
to
narrating and stuff like that.
I guess that
So it's
if you
like,
wanted to create like an overarching genre, sure.
well, not if I wanted to create, like, it's both voiceover work, like, that's,
No,
like,
not
definition.
yeah, it is voiceover work as the like the overarching thing. But then you can break it down into like subgroups.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
Yep.
know, like a moto one or like a motorcycle racer is technically, a driver, but he's not a driver in the sense of NASCAR or a driver in the sense of like uh dirt like rallies and stuff like that. Still a driver, but as an overarching group. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I guess I don't really know what kind of point I was trying to make, but
Just trying to stir up crap, man. Here we are.
I
Trying
mean,
to have a
yeah,
nice
sometimes you gotta
night.
play devil's advocate and just say something that you know might make some people mad, but it starts a conversation that you don't really care about, then you get to sit back with popcorn
You're just
and
trolling
just
right
watch
now.
everything unfold.
Yeah. Just trolling me. Trolling chat.
I'm gonna have like a voice actor on Twitter, like, "So you think what you do is on the same page as what I do? I'll
Yeah.
have you know, I had to go to college for this."
And you just post that Michael Jackson gif of him eating popcorn in a theater, right?
No, you just quote tweet it saying "gatekeeper."
I'll make sure to put that one in my back pocket. All right. Well, I think that's about it for me now, man. What do you feel? Do you got any more hot takes that you want to get off your chest?
No, not really.
Not really? All right. Then
I
I
think we made it
guess
to an hour, so
we made it to an hour, which is
it's
actually longer than I thought we would do, but here we are, like every episode. Um, so with that said, thank you for joining us on this wonderful episode 9, almost episode 10. That's gonna be crazy. Thank you for listening. If you're listening via podcast, we appreciate your support. If you didn't learn anything, I hope you at least enjoyed yourself and maybe had a laugh or two if you find us that funny. And we will see you next Friday at 9 p.m. EST, which means Eastern for those of you who don't know. But today we did it a little bit differently, it being Thursday. Not next week. We'll go back into our regular scheduled programming. So if you're listening to this via podcast and you kind of want to interact with us more, you can find us on YouTube at Dark Sessions, where we record each podcast episode live and take questions at the end after the episode after the podcast episode is completed. So if you'd like to ask us some questions, mingle in the chat, definitely find us there. But in the end, I do hope you enjoyed listening to us ramble on this evening. I hope you have a great Thursday night or wherever you are, a great day. And when we get to it, a great weekend. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
good night, everyone.
That was way late. I'm gonna have to cut that out for the podcast now or something, man.
I'm making more work for you.
You are making more work for me.
Wait, no, use this one instead. Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah, with the coughing and everything. All right, guys. Well, do you have anything for us? I know we didn't really get into too many deep things tonight. That's what she said. I wing it just like I do in life, says Bad Vibes. Hair, hair.
I mean, I think that's the best way to do it, honestly. All jokes aside, you just wing it until you find what works and then do what works.
Yeah, and then you become famous.
And maybe you'll never find what works and you just wing it forever and people enjoy that. So, I don't know.
Like, do we ever
I'm
really
not
know?
gonna
Not really.
gatekeep it. Do whatever works for you.
Gatekeeper. Oh,
Gatekeeper.
yeah, Margbot. He has a hot date tomorrow, so they had to schedule this for today. Man, I wish I had a hot date. Yeah.
No
Exposed.
ladies?
No ladies, man.
Damn.
I don't know what it is. I guess they haven't seen my YouTube channel yet.
Yeah, you just gotta get a screenshot of your channel and like tape it to your forehead.
Sub to Stories After Midnight.
No. Just like a screenshot of your sub count, and then go hit up the clubs.
Yeah, for
I'm telling
real.
you, man.
My identity and who I am will be based entirely on a number.
Exactly. Like, anytime you get into an argument with somebody, just be like, "Yeah, actually, I have 4,000 subs on YouTube."
Do you
So,
know who you're talking to? Oh
yeah,
my
I'm
god.
actually kind of a big deal. So, you might want to like
I make like
check
$5
yourself.
a month. So you might want to check yourself at the door, okay? Oh man. Could you imagine actually doing that though? You get one of those
You don't?
clocks, maybe a little. I get
That'd
custom
be
made
so funny,
t-shirts
man.
that have my sub count on them with my channel name.
There is such a common misconception, and maybe this does change if you become super high status. But I've noticed for me, like, people think like, "Oh yeah, you've got this decent sized channel. I bet you've got all these fake friends IRL and stuff." And it's like, no, like nobody likes me. Like nothing's changed. Nothing at all.
You know what's
I'm being
funny?
a bit dramatic, but honestly though, nothing's changed.
It's kind of unrelated, but it is kind of related. How a lot of people don't do face reveals, like, because they like to keep that, that mystery. I feel like worse if I didn't like reveal myself, because people are gonna work up these images of you, and then you like post this picture, you decide to face reveal, and they're like, "Oh, that's what you look like? You look like Thor in my head. Oh, now the mystery's ruined."
Yeah, if I
I'm
if
like,
I
"Hey,
could go
here I
back in
am.
time though, I would have just never face revealed. I would have just been like a mystery for forever.
F it, man.
But
It's all that.
there's no
It's
going
the
back
thing you
now.
want to cultivate. I want people to see me as a person, not just a YouTube channel. So here you are. Here's my face and all of its two-tiered hair
I don't
goodness, looking like a
I don't want to
Batman
be a
villain.
person. I want to be an object.
You are an object, man.
I actually identify as a Campbell soup can.
Yeah. What are your pronouns?
Campbell soup can.
Oh, I thought it would have been like.
Yeah, I don't respond to anything else.
I thought it would have been like the sound it makes when you open it with a can opener, or like the sound you make when you're trying to scrape out the last bit of it. So literally
I
just
mean,
mouth noises.
it's like I know that they're referring to me,
Campbell soup can.
but the respect isn't there.
Campbell soup can. I like it. Soup
Like,
can.
hey, Tinny Scrape.
Denny Scrape.
It's like actually,
I
it's a
love
Campbell
that.
soup can.
Jimmy Scrape. I love that.
What, you think I'm the bottom of the barrel? You think there isn't substance to this?
I'm laughing
It's
with
more
you.
like tinny plop, bro.
Tinny
There's a
plop.
lot of soup left in here. I don't know what I'm talking about, dude.
I don't even know what to say anymore.
I have no idea.
That's hilarious. We have fun here. Why aren't you all laughing?
Ugh.
Well, I'm
The climate of the internet. I probably just made somebody mad by making a Campbell soup can joke. Let that sink in.
well, YouTube, it's been nice knowing you. I'll see you in the bottom of the barrel in 10 years when someone decides to dig this episode up and listen to it to find this exact time frame. So, in future me, you didn't regret this moment. Stick it to the man. Anyway, I'm going to take off and turn on my air conditioner because it is hotter than Hades in here, and I'm pretty sure I'm sweating in more places than one. And I would very much like to cool down. So, yeah, thank you guys for joining us tonight. It was lovely seeing your avatars in the chat associated to your names, which was then followed by a message from you personally to us. So
On youtube.com.
mm-hmm. dark sessions. Actually, just kidding. We don't have a custom URL yet, but we're almost
On
there. I
the
think it's like
current date
100
of June
subs.
4th, 2020.
I think it's 100 subs where you get that. So we're at 61. So if you're not sharing this podcast, then do you really care about other narrators? I don't know. That would be very, very
Gatekeeper.
gatekeeper.
Yeah,
It's
actually, if you're not subbed to Dark Sessions, you're
what are
like
you doing with your life?
you're like not even you're like not even a part of the conversation, bro.
Yo, do we think you think if we do this enough, we'll get some simps where it's like on Twitch when you're like a cam girl and you're like yelling at your chat because they're not donating or giving you subs?
It's $5.
Like, if you can't afford $5, chat, it's been like an hour and not even a sub. Do you think if we do that enough, that we'll actually be, like we'll get some, as they're said, pay pigs? I've just learned that term.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Chat, what are you doing? It's one sub. It's $3. Okay. It's $3. Anyway, I feel like this is gonna go into a weird direction if we don't stop now. I think we're pretty much ahead, but I'm gonna get to that point where we will not be that far ahead. But yeah, legit. Thanks you guys for joining us. That always at least makes me happy to have some conversations in the chat. So that's all I got.
Yeah, same. I'm kind of soup canned out.
All right, Campbell Soup Can. I feel like if we don't say goodnight now, we're going to be here 6 or 7 good nights later. So, yeah, we don't need that. So, we'll talk to you guys 9 p.m. next Friday. Yes, next Friday. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Got a little bit of a laugh. And yeah, we'll see you next week. So have yourself a great night. Take care now.